Director Patel, you are sitting in that chair for absolutely no reason, because you promised the American people there would be no cover-up, no missing documents, and right now, you are hiding 300 gigabytes of Epstein evidence from the public. The room went silent. Not the polite kind of silent that settles between congressional questions. The total, crushing silence of a chamber full of people who just heard something they could not unhear. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal had been waiting for this moment, and Kash Patel, the most powerful law enforcement official in America, had no idea how deep the hole beneath him already was. That was how it started, in 300 gigabytes, because buried inside an official FBI memo, signed, stamped, filed into the public record, Patel's own bureau had confirmed it. They had recovered over 300 gigabytes of data, physical evidence, and classified materials directly tied to Jeffrey Epstein. 300 gigabytes of secret files. And then Patel and Attorney General Pam Bondi had stood in front of a camera and told the country there was nothing left to see. Their July memo closed with a line that Jayapal read aloud into the microphone like a verdict. No further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. Patel sat perfectly still, but his hands pressed flat against the table. That was the tell, because Jayapal wasn't done. She was only beginning. And what came next would systematically take apart everything Patel had ever said about this case, using nothing but his own words. She had done her homework with the precision of an engineer and the patience of someone who had been watching this cover-up build for years. She started with September 2023. Before Patel had any power, before he had any authority, before he sat at that table under oath, he had been loudly, publicly outraged. He had told Glenn Beck on national television that Epstein's black book was under the, quote, direct control of the director of the FBI. He was pointing fingers then. He was demanding answers then. In December of that same year, he called on the Bureau to, quote, let us know who the predators are. He was on fire with moral clarity. He was fearless. He was a crusader. And then he became the director. February 2025, he tweeted, there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned. June 2025. He sat across from Joe Rogan and said with complete confidence, we've reviewed all the information. We're going to give you every single thing we have in can. Every single thing. Jayapal read each quote slowly, and after each one, she paused just long enough to let the silence do the work. Patel's jaw tightened. The mask was still on, but it was slipping at the edges. But then suddenly, in July, everything changed. She leaned forward. You discovered that Donald Trump's name was all over those files, and you started a cover-up. She said it on the record, under oath, on national television, not as a theory, as a conclusion. And she dared him to deny it clearly. He didn't. What he gave instead was language about disclosure standards and legal frameworks and the complexity of grand jury materials. Jayapal cut through it without blinking. You are under oath, Mr. Patel. You just testified that you did not speak to the president about the Epstein files. She paused. To your knowledge, did Attorney General Pam Bondi speak to the president about what was in those 300 gigabytes? Patel's mouth opened. Then the calculation happened. Visible, real, painful to watch. He couldn't confirm coordination without implicating himself. He couldn't deny knowledge he clearly had. So he said the most dangerous 4 words any official can say before a congressional committee. I can't speak for... Do you have any knowledge? Jayapal pressed immediately. Any knowledge at all? I can't speak for Attorney General Bondi. You are refusing to answer the question. Not an accusation, a fact entered into the record because the Wall Street Journal had already reported what Patel was unwilling to confirm. In May, Pam Bondi had met privately with the president. At that meeting, she had told him his name was in the Epstein files. And at that same meeting, in the same room, the same conversation, she had confirmed that the DOJ did not plan to release those files to the public. 300 gigabytes, hidden, after every promise. Patel pushed back, and this is where the hearing became something else entirely. He straightened up, his voice hardening, and he went on offense. He said he was the only FBI director who had ever welcomed new information in this case. He said the evidence before him was the exact same evidence that the Obama Justice Department and the Biden Justice Department had reviewed, and that those administrations, not him, had made their own decisions about what that evidence established. He challenged Jayapal to look at where she had been when, by his account, the real cover-ups were taking place. You want to talk about cover-ups? Where were you during the Obama and Biden administrations? The deflection was skilled, but Jayapal didn't take the bait. She told him about the women. A group of survivors of Epstein's trafficking network had come to Capitol Hill. Some of them had never testified publicly before in their lives. They had sat in the hallways of Congress and described what had been done to them when they were 14 years old, 16 years old. They had traveled to Washington to ask for one thing: to be heard by the people now holding these positions of power. They had asked to meet with the president. They had asked to meet with the FBI director. They had asked for someone with authority to look them in the eyes and take their accounts seriously. "Have you met with them?" Jayapal asked. Patel began explaining the Bureau's process for receiving and reviewing incoming investigative leads. He talked about the open-door policy for anyone with credible information. He talked about how the FBI handles submissions from the public. He talked about everything except the women sitting somewhere outside that room right now, waiting. "Yes or no," Jayapal said. "Have you met with these women?" "No, yes." "No, no." More process, more framework. And then she asked the question that made the entire chamber go still. Are the victims credible? Not as a legal category, not as an evidentiary threshold, as human beings. As women who had come to Washington and described what had been done to them before they were old enough to vote. Simple, direct, unavoidable. Are they credible? Patel's face went unreadable. He said he was commenting on the evidence in the file. He said the Bureau had routinely invited people to come forward. He said the same evidence he was working with was the evidence that previous administrations had reviewed and found insufficient to support further action. He said it twice. He said it in 3 different ways. He never said yes. "Yes or no," Jayapal said again. Her voice had dropped to something quieter and more dangerous than shouting. "Are these women credible?" 10 seconds of silence. On camera, under oath, in front of the country. "I have answered the question," Patel said. Jayapal looked at him for a long moment. Then calmly, deliberately, she entered the conclusion into the record herself. "Okay, so they're not credible." Patel objected immediately. His composure finally fracturing, his voice rose. "That is not what I said." He told her she was lying about him. He said not to put words in his mouth. He reminded her that it was the first Trump administration that had authorized Epstein's indictment in 2019, that Obama, not Trump, had called the entire thing a hoax. Historical facts, maybe, but not an answer. Not for the women in the hallway, not for the question that had been asked 7 times. Jayapal absorbed it all, and then she said the thing that made Republican members shift in their seats and reporters stop typing for a moment. "Director Patel, you are not protecting justice. You are protecting the silence around these files." Her voice was steady now, and the steadiness of someone who has already won the argument even if the clock runs out. "I don't know whose names are in those 300 gigabytes, but someone does. And the fact that you, the director of the FBI, under oath, in front of this committee, cannot bring yourself to say that the women in this building are credible, tells us everything we need to know about who you are actually protecting." She paused. "You and Pam Bondi will answer for this. Maybe not today, but the day is coming." Patel fired back hard. He said she was making politically motivated accusations without evidence. He said he had done more for accountability in this case than any of his predecessors. He said the statistics spoke for themselves. He said he would not sit there and allow himself to be defamed on national television without responding. And he did not back down, not visibly, not completely. But here is what the statistics don't answer. Here is what the talking points don't cover. Why does a July memo about 300 gigabytes of recovered evidence end with the conclusion that no further disclosure is warranted? Who reviewed those files and made that determination? And why did that determination come, according to the Wall Street Journal's reporting, in the same time window when Pam Bondi was privately informing the president that his name appeared in them? The chairman's gavel came down. Time had expired. The confrontation ended not with a resolution, but with everything still suspended. The questions unanswered, the files sealed, the women still waiting. Patel left that room with his position intact. Jayapal left, having placed something into the congressional record that cannot be erased. Somewhere in 300 gigabytes of recovered files, names, connections. Evidence that 2 senior officials decided the public had no right to see. Now here is where you come in. And this is going to start a fight in the comments, and I want it to. One side says Patel was telling the truth, that the same evidence was reviewed by Obama, by Biden, by career FBI agents across 3 administrations. And none of them found grounds for further action. That this is a political ambush dressed up as oversight. The other side says that when the FBI director cannot look Congress in the eye and call the survivors credible after being asked 7 times? The answer is the answer. That 300 gigabytes don't disappear because a memo says no further disclosure is warranted, that someone in that chain of decisions had a reason to close the door. Which side are you on? Write it below, because here is the twist. The one that will stay with you long after this video ends. We may never actually know the full truth. The files are sealed, the meetings were private, the 300 gigabytes have been reviewed by officials whose own names may be somewhere inside them. Congressional time runs out, gavels come down, and the people with the authority to open those files are the same people with the most to lose if they do. Epstein has been gone for years. The investigations have come and gone. The hearings keep happening, and yet the complete picture has never surfaced. Not once. Not fully. Not on the record. Maybe that is the most honest answer Washington has ever given us. And maybe that is exactly what they were counting on. And if you think the names in those 300 gigabytes would surprise you, think again. Because based on everything that has already surfaced, everything already reported, every name already connected to this case through court filings and investigative journalism, the files that remain sealed may not be protecting national security at all. They may be protecting something far more specific, far more personal, far more powerful than anything a congressional hearing can reach. That is the question Jayapal was really asking. Not about evidence standards or disclosure protocols, about whether the most powerful law enforcement agency in America is capable of holding the most powerful people in America accountable, or whether the system simply exists to protect itself. Kash Patel had 2 years, every public platform, every promise, every tweet, every podcast appearance to prove the answer was yes. And then he got the job, and the 300 gigabytes got sealed. And the women in the hallway kept waiting. Draw your own conclusion and write it below. Because right now, that comment section may be the only place left where the question is still open.